Make no mistake about it, this was a devastating storm, maybe the worst that we have ever experienced. Our first responders have been doing a heroic job protecting our city and saving lives, and they are still fighting fires and conducting life-saving search and rescue missions, and we owe them an enormous debt of gratitude.
I'm Rick Burke, live in the New York Times newsroom. Power is still out for millions of customers in New York and around the Northeast. Reporter Michael Grinbaum is here now with the latest on the storm's impact. Michael, what's the latest casualty number?
We're up to 15 New Yorkers have been killed so far, including 10 in the city. Everything from walking over a live wire in a puddle to a tree falling on a house.
And what's the extent of flooding?
The storm surge has subsided from last night, but there's still standing water all along coastal regions, particularly down in Queens and the Rockaways. All three airports in the region are closed, and LaGuardia particularly, there's a lot of damage on the runways, some of which I think are still under standing water at this point.
How about transit in the city? I read that the subways are the worst damage we've ever seen.
Yeah, they said this is a situation they haven't seen in decades, and I think over the next few days, New Yorkers are really going to be watching to see how the subway recovers from this. I mean, right now, they don't think they'll have a lot of service restored for another 3 or 4 days. And, you know, the subways are really the lifeblood here. I mean, everything from a hot dog vendor to, you know, JP Morgan headquarters can't really function when people can't be coming into Manhattan through the tunnels. So it's a pretty serious operation. It's really affecting all parts of life here in New York City.
Now, you're one of our in-house subway experts. How did it get so bad?
Well, you know, today Governor Cuomo came out and said, you know, we got to redesign this thing. But the truth is, it's tough to protect against this. There's 7 tunnels under the East River connecting Manhattan to Brooklyn. They went in, they took the sensitive components out before the storm, but they couldn't do anything for the river to surge in there, and there's salt water now covering the switches. It's corroding the electrical components. There's a station downtown right by the Staten Island Ferry Terminal. We were told that the water is literally up to the ceiling inside that station, which sounds like something out of a science fiction novel.
Now, so what happens? They have to now pump the water out, replace a lot of the electrical systems, is that?
Yeah, so they're working right now to pump out the water, and you know that's what they expected to do. But I think it's going to be another day or so until the tubes are clear, and then they're going to have to assess what's the damage, how long is it going to take us. They think the subway is going to come back in parts, not as its entirety right now.
So if you live in Manhattan or New York or trying to get into the city, what's the advice? Is there the only way is to drive? Or?
Yeah, well, the good news is that at noon today, almost all the bridges into the city reopened. They'd been closed overnight. A few tunnels are still closed, but yes, you can drive in. Some folks are calling for encouraging people to bike in over the bridges, and bus service in the city is going to be partially restored by 5 p.m.
And airports, what's the sense?
Totally closed right now. And as I said earlier, I think LaGuardia has some serious damage. That's right on the bay, up by Long Island Sound, where there was some significant flooding. It's a little. They think tomorrow they'll start to come back, but right now, in and out. You're not going anywhere.
And also, I want to ask you about the fires that have popped up in the region.
Yeah, down in the Rockaways, which is a peninsula right by JFK Airport, there was an out-of-control fire in actually a fairly affluent neighborhood down there. A lot of summer homes. A lot of them were burnt, as our reporters are telling us, burnt to the ground. It was a fire that went for several hours last night. It was hard for the authorities to put it out. So fire, flooding, I mean, every biblical thing you can imagine came on New York in the last 24 hours.
Well, thanks, Michael. Stick around. I want to get back to you in a minute. We now have a report from Stephen Farrell looking at some of the damage in Brooklyn.
This is Stephen Farrell for the New York Times in Brooklyn. We're surveying areas of the neighborhood for damage caused by Hurricane Sandy. Prospect Park was one of those areas hit. Trees have fallen down. Workers said that one jogger had actually been injured by a tree and that they're closing off the park because of that. Work crews were out today early, cutting down trees, cutting branches off them and making the park safer. It's unclear when it'll be properly open again, although some people were around looking, taking photographs and assessing for themselves the extent of the damage.
I live over on 8th Street and we routinely walk here every morning. So we're sad to see all of this devastation. I can assume that it's much worse in other areas of the park.
Michael, one of the most striking things to watch today has been the response of local officials in and out around New York. Let's start with Mayor Bloomberg. He seems to be in his element when he's talking about the storm and what people should do to, keep safe.
Yeah, Mayor Bloomberg is an engineer, and he prides himself on handling these emergency situations. He's very cold-blooded about it. He's rational, sticks with statistics. And, he's stoic. He's got a bit of a parental sense. He told New Yorkers to go home, make a sandwich, read a good book yesterday. So he has some very specific instructions sometimes.
He didn't tell him to go see a Broadway show. Right?
No, he checked himself on that.
Which he
time.
did a few years ago, right?
He got in a lot of trouble during a blizzard a couple storms ago. Go see a Broadway show. Most New Yorkers, that's a little out of their price range, but.
How about Governor Cuomo?
Governor Cuomo actually last night was out and about Manhattan in the midst of this storm. He went down to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, one of our major thoroughfares, and he was there watching the waters flood in. And he's been out and about the region trying to be, I think, just candid with people about what's happening, letting people know it's going to be a long cleanup. And he wears the jacket. He looks like he's putting out a confident demeanor for himself. Yeah.
Another one who wears the jacket is Governor Christie of New Jersey, and he's been on all the networks for the last 24 hours praising, of all people, President Obama. Let's look at the clip.
I was on the phone for the third time last night with the President of the United States. He called me at midnight last night to check in on how things were going as he was seeing reports about how bad things were in New Jersey. He accelerated the major disaster declaration for New Jersey without the usual red tape. I can't thank the President enough for that. Signed that this morning. And so I have to say this, the cooperation has been great with FEMA here on the ground at our intelligence center, and the cooperation from the President of the United States has been outstanding. He deserves great credit.
I got to say, I'm scratching my head over that one, because here's a man who's been going around the last several months attacking the president on any number of issues, and here he is heaping praise, not just the routine praise, but really saying how great a leader he is on this storm. What do you think is going on here?
Yeah, look, we're 7 days out today from the presidential election. I think a lot of Republicans might be trying to tap him on the shoulder, saying, "Chris, whoa, let's keep down the praise here." He's just, he said that he spoke to President Obama, and the president said, "Call me directly if you have any problems." And Christie seemed to really respond to that. He felt like the president was being straight with him. He was really sticking up, offering all the help the federal government can bring in. I don't remember when big government was something that Chris Christie was a huge fan of, but apparently this storm has changed his mind a little bit.
One last point for all three of these men. What do they have to watch out for politically in the coming days?
Yeah, I think, they want to be honest with people. I think they want to make sure that they can just show confidence and not kind of, you don't want to gaffe like with Mayor Bloomberg. You want to show that you're in command, that someone's taking care of the rescue efforts, and that people can look to their executive for reassurance and some security in a very unsecure time.
Michael, thank you very much. Now we have Peter Baker on the line from Washington with more on the president's response. Now, Peter, what are they saying at the White House and in the Obama campaign about their new friend, Governor Christie?
Well, they'll take praise wherever they can get it. Look, of course, they're happy to look presidential in this moment of crisis. This is, as a matter of politics, just 1 week out from an election, gives President Obama a chance to look above the fray, less petty, less superficial, less trivial, in a way candidates often appear at this point in an election cycle, Governor Christie being one of the toughest critics he's had. They're realistic, though. They understand that tomorrow Governor Christie might come out and start again, making the point that I can think the president did a good job on this hurricane, but still think that Governor Romney would be a better president. So they're not going to get too carried away with it.
And could you tell us what President Obama is doing today vis-a-vis the storm?
He had a conference in the Situation Room, a lot of officials in there with him, including his Chief of Staff, Jack Lew, his Homeland Security Advisor, John Brennan, and on video, officials from across the government updating him on where things stand, what the government is doing to help the states and localities at this point. As you heard from Governor Christie, he was up late last night making phone calls, not just to the governors, even down to the mayors. The mayor of Jersey City said that he got a call from Obama right around 12:30 a.m., probably just after that call to Governor Christie. So, you know, at the very least, he's trying to make sure that everybody understands that he is paying a lot of attention. He's on top of it. There's a limit to how much any president can actually do in such a crisis, but at the very least, as President Bush learned in 2005, it's very important at the very least that you look like you're on top of it.
Now, it may just be because the governors here are dealing with the nuts and bolts, practical issues of flooding and so forth, but it struck me that the president has been a little less in command on the issues involved with the storm than some of the governors are. Is that a reflection of the president and his interest and his knowledge base, or is that just the nature of regional versus national?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think it's probably a difference between where you sit is where you stand, right? If you're president of the United States, you're focused on multiple states. You're focused on the big picture. If you're a governor, you know every street and every town that's getting hit. You know every community that's lost power. Every region of your state that's been affected. So, it's not surprising, I think, that the president's knowledge base would be a little bit more global than granular at this point.
And in terms of the practical campaigning, are they now turning, the Obama campaign now turning to President Clinton to do a lot of the surrogate campaigning for him? And how's that working out?
Right, President Clinton, Vice President Biden has been out there. President Obama, of course, just canceled tomorrow's swing through Ohio that he had planned to stay back here and monitor the storm response. Again, as a matter of logistics and practicality, he could probably do that from anywhere, Air Force One, and the traveling White House is certainly capable of allowing him to do two things at one time, but he understands, his people understand that as a matter of optics, as a matter of atmospherics, people want to see their president in the White House as if that was, his sole occupation at this point. So he'll stay off the campaign trail for another couple of days, presumably get back out there on Thursday for the final swing heading to next Tuesday's election.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much. Let me go now to Michael Shear, who is now via Skype, to talk about Governor Romney's response. Michael, I'll ask you the same question I asked Peter. What is it about Christie, and what are they saying in the Romney campaign about that?
Well, look, I think that what the Romney campaign has said to me specifically is that they don't mind. This is not a time for politics. This is a time for the governor to embrace do whatever he needs to do for the state. Although I think privately, a lot of Republicans are wondering whether he can't dial it back just a little. You can praise the office of the presidency, and want the kind of cooperation with the administration without specifically praising the president's leadership, which, after all, is what the governor has been slamming for the past weeks.
Now, it's interesting. We have Governor Romney today in Ohio, in the same campaign venue he had long planned to be in today, but he wasn't talking straight politics.
Yeah, he's really, talk about having to walk a delicate line, right? He's not president. He doesn't have the kind of platform that Mr. Obama does to kind of present that kind of image of somebody in charge of something, of the response, of the federal response. So he's trying to kind of wiggle his way into the story. He went to a venue where he was trying to raise money and raise supplies, emergency supplies, relief supplies, do something that presents himself as kind of caring about the situation on the East Coast. On the same time, it's a rally, it's a gymnasium, lots of supporters, people with signs that say "Fire President Obama." It's sort of this weird hybrid where he's mixing politics, but not looking like he's mixing politics. And at the end of the day, he's going to get good headlines in Ohio newspapers.
I thought they were telling people to take the signs down.
Yeah, look, they're trying to do what they can. I think they recognize the optics are not good if it looks like he's being too political. At the same time, by putting himself out there, reporters throughout the course of the day have been literally trying to get to him to ask him about his position on FEMA, which during the presidential primaries, he basically said, look, FEMA should be devolved back to the states, and there's no real need for emergency management of this kind at the federal level. That's obviously very, potentially controversial on a day like today. And by holding these events, he's trying to dodge and duck and weave those questions, but it's hard.
Now, Mike, if you're a voter in one of the battleground states, you would have no idea that these candidates have sort of taken a break from overt campaigning with the advertising that's going on. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, we've got reporters in some of these battleground states like Ohio and Iowa, and they report that when they're watching the morning newscasts, not only are they seeing a bunch of surrogates. You mentioned Bill Clinton before, but you've got the candidates' wives around. You've got other surrogates, fanning across these places. Vice President Biden holding events, but then you also have this just deluge of campaign ads every 30 seconds. Another one. Not only from the campaigns, but also a kind of last-minute tens of millions of dollars from these third-party groups, the super PACs, we call them, that are just, making the campaign one endless, TV broadcast.
Okay, Mike Shear in Washington, thanks very much.
Sure.
It's hard to believe, but Election Day is a week away exactly. Will voters be going to the polls, or will they be worried about flooding in their homes? Michael Cooper joins me now with the latest. Now, Michael, I know you're not worried about flooding because you are the only person I know who lives in Lower Manhattan who has power. Can you explain that?
Well, that's right. My apartment complex actually makes its own power, part of the cogeneration movement of the 1970s, which came in very handy this past day or two.
So you're just gloating while
Right.
all your other neighbors are without power. But on a serious note about the voting, we heard Governor Christie again say today, I don't care about Election Day. It seems like people aren't thinking about next Tuesday, but practically speaking, how might voting be affected?
Well, next Tuesday is going to come much quicker than people realize, and though Governor Christie was characteristically blunt when he said, I don't give a damn about Election Day, the fact is that the nation is going to be electing a president in 7 days, and there are lots of places that are in trouble. And in fact, with so much early voting now, it's already taking a toll. I mean, I spoke to some of the swing states that have early voting and found out that, in Virginia, which has some but not a lot of early voting, about 10 of their 134 stations were closed today. In North Carolina, where early voting makes a big difference, there was at least one or two that were closed for flooding today. And in Ohio, there was reports of flooding at of a power outage in Erie County, where people are already casting ballots. So with 16 million people voting already and about 1 in 3 votes going to be cast before Election Day, this really throws a monkey wrench into things.
So what's the alternative?
Well, there are things that could happen. I mean, theoretically, Congress could change the election day. It's an act of Congress that says that the president will be elected on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November.
Has that ever happened in a presidential campaign?
No, and it's considered highly unlikely. Also, states, administer their own elections. Theoretically, it could be possible for some states to do it. That also seems very unlikely. There was a lot of discussion about this after the September 11th attacks. I was covering the New York mayor's race that day. It was a primary day in New York City. And I remember as soon as the airplanes hit the World Trade Center, calling the Metro desk, and they said, well, come in, we still have a primary to cover. And it wasn't until 10 or 11 that morning that it was canceled, and then I went down to the site. But so, that was a case where an election was canceled, but it was easy because it was a local election, a primary election.
Right.
If you were to cancel or postpone a presidential election, it would be very strange because you would know how all the other votes counted in the other states. It might affect how people voted.
Could they just delay it for everyone for a week or so?
I suppose they could. I mean, if it were an act of Congress, but the smart money says that that's not going to happen.
And the reality is it's not that bad in many of these places.
I mean, most of the people that I've spoken to say that they really expect they'll be up and running. I think there could be chaos in places. I mean, certainly parts of Long Island that are underwater right now will, at a minimum, have to move the polling place, which could lead to confusion. There's the question of if people have bad time, if roads are blocked, if there's flooding, if there's still power outage, will they go to vote? There's the question of people who are voting by mail, will their absentee ballots get there in time if postal service is delayed? There are a lot of complications that the storm is going to put into this election.
And talk about who has the better get out the vote effort. Getting out the vote with flooding and so forth will be that much more tricky, as you say.
Right. I mean, Virginia is a perfect example of that. If I was asking about where the closed polling sites are today, and a number of them are in northern Virginia, which are strongholds for President Obama's campaign, but a lot of them are also along the West Virginia border in coal country because there's snow there, and that's a place that the Romney campaign has really been hitting. So all of these things have, ramifications.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. Before we go, look at some of the local businesses here in New York that have stayed open throughout the storm.
Yeah, we work all night. We open 24 hours. I usually start at 6 o'clock. By the bridge, they was closed. I walk from Queens to here.
I order 2 egg and cheese. Over there. Yeah. Can I take a coffee now? I work at the Intercontinental New York Times Square in the engineering department, and we spent most of the night reassuring the guests that that Times Square is historically a very low activity area.
We had some power glitches last night, elevator entrapments, equipment malfunctions. And what we do is we take 2, 3, 4 hour breaks at a time, and then we just rotate the shifts around the clock. We've been open here since Sunday afternoon.
It was a hard night, you know. Where I live, the power actually went out. So I'm just trying to find out if they're okay. I have been here for 3 days and I haven't gotten in contact with my family. I hope they're okay.
We've been walking around trying to find places that are open to eat, but there's no shops to buy anything other than coffee and breakfast. And they're running out of bread and things like that. Well, yesterday we found 2 shoe shops that were open, which was pretty good. So they obviously like selling shoes here in New York.
So we came to buy boots. Hurricane boots.
That's all for now. Stay with us online for more on this storm and Campaign 2012. I'm Rick Burke. Thanks for watching.